Hey, howdy, hello, and welcome to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Steam Redlight series, the series where we look at Steam's most lowly and controversially rated games to see if they're really as bad as the internet says they are. I'm your host for the day, Smirk. So today's game is called Drift Long Racing. It was released on November 20th of 2020 and is priced as a $1 game. It was developed and published by ChangeMe and has 3 reviews in total, with 66% of those reviews being positive. So technically, by some stretch, this kind of qualifies. Interestingly enough, ChangeMe has 2 games out right now, both in early access, one being this one, and the other being called Retro Wave Need for Speed Drift, which I bought mostly because I like the novelty of having a game called Need for Speed that's not published by EA in my Steam inventory. Anyways, this game is early access, so just like Filmmaker Tycoon, I'll just be evaluating the core gameplay and skipping over polish and non-game breaking bugs. This game is actually being developed for a mobile release, which was indicated by this welcoming message, so I'll also have to weigh that into the evaluation. If you haven't thought about this already, you might be wondering if giving this game a somewhat serious review seems necessary, and for most cases, it isn't. But I found this game and thought that trying to evaluate a mobile-bound title might help develop my expectations in that realm, so I guess you can kind of say this is personally motivating for me in one of the most pathetic ways possible. Long drift racing is pretty simple. It has cars and it has tracks, and each track has both a drift and racing variant. In the drift variant, you just want to rack up the most points, whereas in racing maps, you'll want to just place as high as possible against the AI. Completing maps gives you money, which in turn allows you to unlock more tracks and other cars. There doesn't seem to be any performance-related upgrades to cars at this time, but on some cars you can change the body paint color. However, no other aesthetic modifications like decals, rim changes, tints, etc. seem to be available or planned. I like how in the early access description, the developer says there's only 2 tracks and 5 different cars, but there's like 6 tracks, not including the 2 variants or the night versions of each, and at least 8 or so cars with different stats. Down in the About This Game section, the developer says there's more than 8 maps and 40 different cars, but there's only 32 cars in total. There technically are 26 maps, but each map has a drift and a race variant, and all but the last 3 maps have a night version, both with their own drift and race variant as well. So if you actually count the amount of unique maps, there's 8. Anyways, the only controls that matter are the WASD keys and the spacebar. WASD goes forward, reverses, and turns right or left. Spacebar, in racetrack variants, is the brake. In the drift variants, your car just brakes every time you turn to get that drifty feeling. While you're drifting, you rack up points for chaining drifts together, so if you're any good at snaking in Mario Kart, this is gonna be your kind of game. Drifting for longer periods of time adds on higher multipliers up to a 9 times, which I guess makes the title of this game seem more like an instruction and less of a marketable title. If you see a car approaching you like this, that's the main character of a racing anime on their way to f*** you up. This game also features 4 different camera angles, 2 of which are mostly useless, that you can change using the C button. Here's the default camera. Here's the second useful angle, here's mostly useless camera 1, and here's mostly useless camera 2. This game also has a singular achievement. What that achievement is, nobody knows, and it has no tooltip text, and only 0.1% of the game's owners have it. I hope to find out one day what it is. Okay, well, that's about all the foundation I can give you because this game doesn't have a whole lot to talk about. Something I enjoyed is that you can use Initial D's iconic AE86, aptly called the PG86 in this game. The only thing it's missing is the Fujiwara Tofu sticker. With this car, it only took me 33 minutes into the game to be able to complete a whole map without dropping my drift combo once, so I guess you can say I'm kinda a drift long racing professional now. Well, that's about it, so let's move on to the ungoodening. Starting with the smallest of botherings and ending with the biggest, something I noticed about this game is that the weight of the cars doesn't really seem to matter when it comes to collisions. While I was driving this thick-ass truck called the Bison, I went soaring after running over a sign.
That's a thick-ass bison!
I also would get knocked over pretty consistently by other cars. This is kind of strange since mass is accounted for as a stat, but it only seems to matter during the drift.
Can anybody help me get down? I'm a little stuck over here.
There's also like 9 cars in a row that share the exact same stats. I get that it's probably just so that the cars can be selected based on the body structure, but did they have to be the exact same? After looking as closely as I could at the stats, there's roughly 10 cars with unique stats out of the 32 cars in total. If anybody was curious, my favorite car is called Sport Car 5. And if you want to know any more about it, well, its description, Sport Car 5. I probably wouldn't have brought up the music in this game since it's mostly not noteworthy, but there's this odd thing that happens where each track seems to stop halfway in before going to the next one. You also can't stop the music. The settings menu has a mute sound toggle, but it won't mute the music. The mute sound toggle just turns off the sound effects in the game. I also feel like this music is going to cause me to get hit with a copyright claim. I can just kind of feel it in my bones.
Can we copy a strike?
Smirkworks.
Latest video?
I was interested in seeing how this game compared to the developer's other release, Retrowave Need for Speed Drift, and actually found that these drifting and racing game modes already exist within that game. I would even say that these game modes have better variety in that game's release than this one, since the tracks have some additional features. There's wet and dry versions of some tracks, there's more AI players, and that game features an additional game mode that's essentially just an endless runner, but with cars. The only downside is that there's less straight car selection, but I feel like the cars could have just easily been ported over since they come from the Unity Asset Store. Drift Long Racing overall just feels really unnecessary, kind of like this video, when the developer could have just easily just loaded in different cars or maps into their other release. Also, I know I'm not reviewing the Retrowave Need for Speed Drift game, but I think it's pretty funny that the developer claims the AI feels pretty solid, but then they go and do this shit. Lastly, I just didn't really find Drift Long Racing particularly fun or challenging, since I was able to essentially master the core gameplay mechanic in under an hour. I also can't really imagine why this game is available on the computer. I don't see many people downloading this game on their phone, then saying to themselves, wow, you know what would make this better? If I could play it on my computer. With all those things being said, let's move on to the verdict.
Gotta keep up.
To highlight this game's strengths, you can play as Initial D's Takumi's AE86, which is kind of fun, but playing as the AE86 isn't a feature that's really exclusive to this game. To look at this game's weaknesses, the weight of the cars don't seem to matter, there's a multitude of cars that share the same exact stats, the music isn't mutable and it cuts out halfway through each track, there's no reason this game couldn't have just been merged into the developer's previous game, and ultimately the game isn't that fun or challenging in any capacity. I think it almost goes without saying, but just in case, I do not recommend Drift Long Racing. If you're still with me, this review probably seemed a little unnecessary, and some would even think that this review is probably a little bit mean. It's just that this game seems rather heartless. There's nothing wrong with mobile games being made available on computers, especially if they only cost $1, but there's no reason Drift Long Racing should exist when it's really just a weaker clone of a game made by the same developer less than a month ago with half the effort. If the developer wanted to introduce some features to try and turn this opinion around, it could benefit from some workable goal, whether it be a story or a mission mode, or unlocking customizations to your favorite car, either technical or aesthetic. That would probably fix the problem of the game not really being that fun. You see, once I mastered the drifting mechanic, there really wasn't anything else keeping me involved in wanting to play the game. It just needs some more solid features to justify its existence from Retrowave Need for Speed Drift. Although, when that game inevitably gets taken down for trademark reasons, I suppose this will be the only one left. Well, that about wraps this video up. Thanks for watching. If you like what I did here, consider supporting the channel by liking the video or sharing the video to someone who may like it. I welcome any comments about this game, the review itself, or any suggestions you may have. Lastly, subscribe if you couldn't shirk the smirk, and maybe I'll see you next week.
Goodbye, everyone. I'll remember you all in